New Orleans has no rivals when it comes to culture or history. And Mardi Gras, well, Mardi Gras is something you just have to experience for yourself. One year, spring break at Purdue University fell at the same time that Mardi Gras in New Orleans was going on, and so we decided to check it out. I had taken a group of students to New Orleans the year before during spring break, but that year the Mardi Gras had not begun really in full force before we left. We'd done a work project. We had done some significant, I think, work on a community center on Rampart Street, which was right on the edge of the French Quarter. And when the folks there heard that we were coming down this year to celebrate Mardi Gras, they offered to let us stay there at the center. And so we took our sleeping bags and bedded down, and we were right there near the action. So we had a ringside seat, so to speak. We got there on Saturday, and the parades had already begun, so we had a chance to experience some of the feeling, some of the festivities, some of the hospitality. The season was warm, the people were friendly, and there was just a festive atmosphere in the whole city. I was a little puzzled, though, because as we looked around, we saw several U-Haul trailers and vans parked along Canal Street. And I would find out later what their purpose was. But we had settled in. We had not gone specifically to party. Our main, although that was part of it, of course, but we had decided to work with the Mardi Gras Drug Coalition. The word on the streets was that there would be about 10,000 street people that were going to invade, if you want to use that word, the Mardi Gras. This was in the 70s. The hippie drug culture was in full force. And while nobody had an accurate count, I'm pretty sure we had about 10,000. So we had before the night was over on Tuesday night, we had the druggies and the drunks. The experience that I want to focus on took place primarily on Bourbon Street. Tuesday arrived, and it was wall-to-wall people. There were people packed together that reminded me of perhaps anchovies in a can. The atmosphere was nonviolent, very little altercations, very little violence. But the people were feeling good. Some of them were just feeling good, and some of them had forgotten what feeling good was all about. And our responsibility was to monitor the street and to find those people for whom the festivities had gotten out of control and they had lost control, and was to get them some kind of help. It was a sight like I had never seen before. I saw one man, a heavy-set guy with a t-shirt and his bald cap pulled around backwards, smoking a cigar. I saw him put the cigar out in the rump of the policeman's mount. And what amazed me more than anything else was that neither the horse nor the policeman moved. They were the epitome of control. That would change at midnight. When 12 o'clock came, the whistle blew. And if you had no valid reason for being on the street, you were taken off the street, you were picked up, you were carried, you were marched, and those who had no control were taking to those U-Haul vans and trailers that we'd seen as we came into the city. And they were taken off to what I was told was a temporary compound that was several miles away in the city. Street sweepers lined up at one end of the street, the policemen on their mounts, and the whistle blew, and the street sweepers and the policemen moved down Bourbon Street. The party was over, and I mean over. New Orleans was dead for the night. The next morning, Ash Wednesday, was quiet. And our little group from Purdue sat down at the Café du Monde drinking chicory-laced coffee and eating beignets and reflecting on the scene that we had witnessed. One of our students, we were talking about partying, and one of our students said, "You know, it's too bad that so many of the people were so bombed out that they couldn't really enjoy." And that was true for a lot of people. A lot of people, I presume, had an enjoyable time collecting the beads that came down from the floats and all of that, which makes up New Orleans. And the floats were fantastic. I have no idea how much work and effort went into making those floats, but they were impressive. We talked about the meaning of Lent. Mardi Gras, which had become Fat Tuesday, was the last chance to party before the Ash Wednesday began for the religious. And it was an all-out blast, of course. Lent was supposed to be a time of reflection, of identification with the suffering not only of the Christ, but of all people. It was a sobering time, and it was for us. We talked about partying, we talked about the enjoyment that we had gotten. We also had seen the seamy side, and that made an impression. We made a commitment, our little group, that as time went on, we would commit ourselves to identifying with the poor and the oppressed and the struggling in the world. We finished our coffee, our beignets, got in our cars, and headed home. It was a fairly long trip. We drove straight through. And even the drivers had trouble staying awake. But we arrived safely back at Purdue, and I must add, sober. I still have the recipe that I got from Café du Monde for beignets, and every once in a while I'll make up a batch and we'll have coffee, and not the chicory coffee. I never did develop a taste for that, but we'll have coffee and beignets, and I'll think about that experience. I've lost contact with the students. I have no idea. That was 40 years ago now. I have no idea what they're doing, but I wonder if they ever remember the night, the time that we spent in New Orleans, and if it has made any impact or had any meaning for them. All I can say is that it has for me. It was an experience that I don't particularly want to repeat. I can't say that I enjoyed all of it, although I did enjoy a great deal of it. The food, the jazz, the floats, all of that makes up a curious mix of partying. But what impressed me as much as anything else is that the silence of the first day of Lent. And while I cannot say, of course, what it meant to anybody else, I can say that Ash Wednesday, even though it came in quietly, made a tremendous impact on me.